The wind howled across the white desert of Antarctica. The sky looked like endless gray glass, and snow drifted in waves that covered everything human hands had built. Far out from the main base, a small observatory stood alone. Only one man worked inside that week, Ethan Cole, a quiet engineer who liked machines more than noise. He spent most of his days fixing frozen cables, checking radio signals, and writing notes that nobody ever read. He liked the silence. It made him feel safe. But that night, something strange happened, something that would change every day that followed. It began as a light in the sky, brighter than any plane or satellite. Ethan noticed it through the cracked window of the observatory. At first he thought it was a meteor, but it moved too slowly, almost like it was trying to control its fall. Then it split apart, leaving a long golden trail before crashing far out beyond the ridge. The sound reached him a few seconds later, a soft, deep thud that shook the snow from the roof. His radio hissed, went silent, then came back with static. He called the base, but no one answered. For a long time he stood staring at the direction of the crash. Something deep inside told him to stay away, but curiosity was stronger. He packed a thermal coat, a flare, and a small medical kit, then stepped into the storm. The journey took more than an hour. The wind bit into his skin, and every step sank into heavy snow. When he finally reached the ridge, he saw something burning faintly under the ice. It was a shape, smooth, curved, and nothing like any aircraft he had ever seen. Half of it was buried. The air around it felt heavy, almost humming. He thought it was some secret drone or satellite, but when he came closer, he heard a sound from inside, a soft, uneven breath. Someone or something was alive in there. Ethan knelt beside the opening. The metal was warm, glowing faintly blue. He pushed snow away, trying to find an entrance, and a small door slid open by itself. Warm air poured out, carrying a scent that reminded him of rain. Inside, the light was dim, and the walls pulsed like the inside of a living thing. Lying near the doorway was a figure motionless. At first glance, he thought it was a person in armor, but when he touched the shoulder, the material felt too smooth, too light. The figure stirred and turned its head. Ethan froze. The face that looked back at him was not human. Her skin had a pale silver tone, faintly reflective under the blue light. Her eyes were large, bright like polished stone, and her hair, if it could be called that, was fine and dark, almost liquid. She was breathing fast, her expression filled with pain and fear. Ethan didn't know what to do. He wanted to run, to call someone, but something in her eyes stopped him. She looked hurt, not dangerous. Her hands clutched at her side where the armor had cracked. "It's okay," Ethan said softly, even though he knew she couldn't understand. "You're hurt. I'll help." He didn't know why he said it. He just knew he couldn't leave her there. He wrapped her in his spare thermal blanket and slowly dragged her away from the wreck, before the cold could claim them both. Every step back to the observatory felt endless. She was heavier than she looked, and he had to stop many times to catch his breath. By the time he reached the observatory, his hands were numb. He laid her on a cot near the small heater and carefully removed part of her armor where it was cracked. The wound underneath wasn't like any he had seen. The skin shimmered faintly, and instead of blood, there was a clear, glowing fluid that stopped flowing when exposed to air. He cleaned it as best as he could, using sterile gauze and warm water. The alien woman, he couldn't call her anything else, watched him through half-closed eyes. When he offered her water, she hesitated, then took the cup with both hands. Her fingers were long and graceful. She drank slowly, never taking her gaze off him. "Ethan," he said, touching his chest. "My name is Ethan." She blinked, trying to repeat the sound. Then. Her voice was soft but carried a strange echo, like two tones speaking at once. He nodded, smiling in surprise. "Yes, Ethan." She placed a trembling hand on her chest and said something that sounded like Siren. That became her name. Over the next few days, Ethan cared for her in secret. He locked the door, turned off the external radio, and pretended everything was normal when the main base called. He told them the snow had damaged his antenna, and they believed him. At night, he and Siren communicated with gestures. She learned fast, picking up words by pointing at objects. "Fire," she said once, touching the heater. "Cold," she whispered, pointing outside. He was amazed by how human she seemed in emotion, even if her face was otherworldly. Sometimes she would stare at the stars through the window for hours. Other times she would study his hands as if trying to understand how fragile he was. One evening, as the storm quieted, She walked to the small metal table where he was fixing a radio. She placed her hand on his, gently stopping him. Then she traced a small mark on his wrist with her fingertip, a pattern that glowed faintly for a second before fading. She smiled, a tired but peaceful smile, and said something he couldn't translate. He didn't know it then, but that mark would stay faintly visible for years, a silent reminder of that night. A week passed, and she grew stronger. She even tried to help him repair the generator, though she often laughed at his clumsy tools. The sound of her laughter filled the empty place in his heart he never realized was there. But one night the sky lit up again. Another vessel appeared high above the horizon, moving in a slow pattern. Seren's expression changed the moment she saw it. She looked both relieved and afraid. She turned to him and touched his face gently. "Go," she whispered, one of the few English words she had learned. Then she pointed to the door. Ethan shook his head. "No, I'll stay." Her eyes softened. "Safe," she said, touching his chest again. Then she pressed the metal shard, the same one he would keep forever, into his hand. By the time he ran outside to stop her, the air was alive with light. Her damaged ship had started glowing again. She looked back once, her silver eyes catching the faint morning sun, and gave him one last nod. Then the ship lifted into the clouds and vanished, leaving only the hum of energy and a hole in the snow where it had stood. Ethan stayed there for a long time, clutching the shard. The cold didn't bother him anymore. The sky was quiet again, but he knew what he had seen was real. Somewhere out there, beyond the clouds and stars, a woman named Seren was alive, and though the world would never believe him, he promised himself one thing: he would never forget her, not for the rest of his life. 15 years passed since that night in Antarctica, yet Ethan Cole still remembered every detail as if it had happened yesterday. The sound of the storm, the strange light in the sky, and her voice softly speaking his name for the first time. After that event, his life slowly returned to its quiet routine, but something inside him was never the same. He left the observatory and took a job as a ship mechanic in Alaska, where the long winters reminded him of the cold silence of that Antarctic night. He liked the calm of the docks, the steady sound of waves, the metallic scent of machines, and the way the stars reflected in the water at night. People around him often called him the quiet one. He didn't talk much, didn't share stories, and kept to himself. When his co-workers asked why he left his old job, he only said he wanted a simpler life. But in truth, he couldn't explain what had happened that winter. How could he tell them that he once saved someone from another world? They would only laugh or think he had lost his mind. Ethan still kept the metal shard she had given him. It was small, smooth, and carried faint lines that glowed dimly under moonlight. He wore it as a pendant around his neck, hidden under his shirt. Sometimes when he touched it, he felt a faint warmth, like a heartbeat. Every year on the same date, he went out to the frozen bay alone. He stood there in the snow, looking up at the stars, waiting for a sign. He didn't know what he was hoping for: a sound, a light, maybe even a shadow across the sky. But nothing ever came. The world had moved on, and he was just a man holding on to a memory no one else believed in. Still, he never let go of that memory. He remembered the way she had looked at him, curious, gentle, and full of something human, even though she wasn't from this earth. He often wondered what happened to her. Was she safe? Did she ever think about him? Or was he just another fleeting moment in her long, distant life? Life went on quietly. Ethan lived in a small wooden cabin near the docks. His neighbors thought of him as a kind but lonely man who fixed boats and helped children with their bicycles in his free time. Inside his cabin, he had one room filled with small inventions, radio parts, tools, and pieces of metal he liked to collect. It was his way of keeping busy, though deep down, he was still searching for something he couldn't name. Sometimes, strange things happened around him. Radios would crackle for no reason when he was near. Compass needles would spin slowly even on calm days. One evening, the northern sky shimmered with lights far brighter than usual. His friend Tom called it a lucky aurora. But Ethan knew it was something else. He felt it in his chest, a soft, familiar hum, like the one he'd heard when Seren's ship had come alive years ago. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, watching the sky. The air was still, almost expectant. Then faintly his radio turned on by itself. It made a soft sound, 3 short beeps, 1 long, the same pattern he had once used in Antarctica to test signal strength. He froze, staring at the small device. No one had touched that frequency in years. He leaned closer. "Hello?" he whispered, though his voice trembled. Static filled the air, followed by a faint rhythmic tone, then silence. He waited the whole night, but no more sounds came. The next morning, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. He went to work as usual, fixing engines and tightening bolts, but his thoughts were far away. Every noise, every hum of metal reminded him of her voice. As weeks passed, the strange incidents continued. Tools moved from where he left them. The shard around his neck sometimes pulsed faintly when he stood under the stars. Even the air seemed to change, electric, like before a storm. One evening, while he sat on the dock watching the reflection of the moon on the water, a little girl from the nearby cabin came running to him. "Mr. Ethan," she said, pointing toward the mountains. "There's light up there, like a shooting star, but it's not falling." Ethan looked up. Above the distant peaks, a single light hovered, too steady to be a star, too silent to be an aircraft. His heart began to race. He didn't say anything, only smiled faintly at the girl and told her to go home before it got cold. When she left, he stayed there for hours, watching the light move slowly across the sky. It felt like it was searching. For him, days turned into weeks. Then one night, a blizzard rolled in from the sea. Snow fell thick and fast, and the wind howled through the cracks of his cabin. He sat inside, wrapped in his old coat, trying to read. The power flickered, then went out completely. He reached for the small oil lamp and lit it. The flame glowed soft and orange. Outside, the wind suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, unnatural. Then the radio on his workbench came alive with the same pattern of beeps, 3 short, 1 long. His hands trembled as he stood up. The light of the lamp flickered again, though there was no wind. He opened the door slowly. The snow had stopped falling, but the air shimmered faintly. In the distance, a low humming sound echoed across the frozen bay. He recognized it instantly. His heart pounded in his chest. He stepped outside, boots crunching on the snow. The sound grew louder, then steadied. The sky above the tree line glowed with a pale silver light. It wasn't lightning. It wasn't anything from this world. For a moment he thought he saw a shape moving through the light, tall, graceful, familiar. But then it faded, and the night returned to stillness. Ethan stood there for a long time, staring at the empty sky. He felt something deep inside him stir, a quiet certainty that the waiting was almost over. When he went back inside, he sat at his desk and looked at the metal shard. It pulsed softly like a heartbeat in his hand. He smiled, whispering to himself, "You're still out there, aren't you, Serene?" Outside, the storm began again. But he wasn't afraid. For the first time in 15 years, he felt hope, a small light burning quietly inside him. Somewhere beyond the cold night sky, an alien warrior woman with silver eyes might be looking at the same stars, remembering the same human who once saved her. And soon she would come back. Ethan didn't know when or how, but he knew one thing for sure: she hadn't forgotten him. The northern sky was clear that evening, brighter than Ethan had ever seen. Snow covered the mountains like soft blankets, and the air smelled crisp, like the first breath of winter. He had been working late in his cabin repairing a small boat engine when the radio crackled again. The pattern of 3 short beeps followed by a long tone made him freeze. His hands trembled as he set down the wrench. The sound was unmistakable. It had been years, but he recognized it instantly. The rhythm of it had been left in his memory by the tiny signals she had made with her ship so long ago. Ethan rushed to the window. The stars reflected on the frozen lake, shining like diamonds scattered across black velvet. At first he saw nothing unusual. Then, in the far distance above the mountains, a silver glow appeared. It hovered steadily, unlike a plane, unlike a meteor. It was deliberate, controlled, and moving slowly toward the earth. His heart pounded. For 15 years he had imagined this moment, Prayed for it, wondered if it was real, and now it was happening. The hum of energy grew louder. It wasn't loud like thunder, but it resonated in his chest. Ethan took a deep breath and stepped outside into the snow, his boots crunching with every cautious step. The cold air burned his lungs, but he barely noticed. He was focused only on that light, moving closer with an almost graceful purpose. Then, the glow split apart, revealing a shape that made his breath catch. A tall figure descended from the sky, framed in silver light. Its movements were elegant, steady, and human-like, yet unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. A moment of disbelief froze him in place, but then the shape stepped forward and he saw her clearly. Seren. She was taller than he remembered, strong and confident. Her armor was sleek, marked with faint scratches that told of distant battles, yet it still shimmered under the moonlight. Her hair was the same dark cascade he remembered, framing the striking silver of her skin. But her eyes were exactly as he remembered, sharp, bright, filled with a mixture of curiosity, determination, and something gentler, something like warmth. Ethan's knees shook. He wanted to run, to call out, to embrace her, but words failed him. She took a careful step forward, and the snow seemed to part gently beneath her boots. The hum of her ship faded, replaced by silence so complete that the wind itself seemed to hold its breath. She stopped a few meters away, studying him. Recognition flickered across her face, softening the warrior-like determination he had always imagined behind her silver eyes. Then she whispered in English this time, a voice soft yet clear. "Human, I never forgot you." Ethan's heart leapt. His mouth opened, but no words came. She smiled faintly, one of those rare, quiet smiles that made everything else disappear. The snow, the cold, the years of waiting. "Serene," he finally managed, his voice shaking. You're really here." Her hand reached out, not to touch, but as if measuring the reality of him, the human who had saved her all those years ago. She tilted her head slightly, remembering, reliving, acknowledging the bond they had formed in the silence of the Antarctic night. "Yes," she said. "I promised I would find you." Ethan felt warmth spreading through his chest. He could not believe it. All the dreams, the nightly vigils, the quiet hope he had carried for 15 years. Now they had an answer. And that answer was standing there, alive, more real than he could have ever imagined. For several minutes they stood silently. The world around them felt suspended. Snowflakes drifted gently. The wind was absent, and even the stars seemed to pause. Then Saren took a step closer. Her armor made a soft chime with movement, but she did not speak immediately. Instead, she simply watched him, her expression softening with memories. Ethan felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. He remembered the warmth she had brought into that cold, lonely place, the small gestures of understanding and trust, the silent bond that had grown between them. And now she was back, as though the years had not passed, as though nothing could separate them again. I kept your shard," Ethan said finally, reaching beneath his coat. He pulled out the small, glowing piece of metal she had left him so long ago. She leaned forward, gently taking it in her hand. Her eyes lit up at the familiar touch, and a quiet laugh escaped her lips, a sound that made Ethan's heart swell. "You never forgot," she said softly. "Even when I was gone, you remembered me." Ethan shook his head, smiling through the tears. "I never could forget you." "How could I?" She studied him for a long moment, as if memorizing every line of his face. Then she touched the shard, pressing it to her chest. The glow pulsed softly like a heartbeat. Ethan realized then that she had carried him with her too, everywhere she had gone, across the stars, through battles he could not imagine. The wind picked up slightly, scattering snow around their feet. Serene glanced upward toward her ship, which hovered silently a few meters above the ground. She could leave any time, yet she did not. Ethan understood that she had made a choice that mattered more than the vast distances of space or the responsibilities of her world. "Do you want to come inside?" Ethan asked, his voice small but hopeful. She nodded, and together they walked toward his cabin. Every step was careful, cautious, filled with the weight of 15 years of waiting. Inside, the warmth of the small room wrapped around them. The lamp's light flickered gently across her silver skin, highlighting the familiar contours of her face. They sat across from each other at the small wooden table. Words were slow at first. Ethan asked about her journey, her ship, her life across the stars. Seren spoke softly, choosing her words with care. She told him about planets he could not imagine, battles that tested her in ways the human mind could barely comprehend, and a promise she had kept, to return to him no matter what. Ethan listened, amazed at the patience and determination she had shown. His heart filled with pride and relief. He realized that she had not come as a visitor or a curiosity. She had come for him, and that knowledge made every lonely night, every impossible hope worth it. By the time the first hints of dawn touched the sky, they both sat quietly, no longer needing words. The years of separation, the long wait, and the distance between their worlds felt smaller, almost irrelevant. They had found each other again, and for now that was enough. Outside, the northern sky began to glow with the early light of morning. But Ethan did not look. His eyes were fixed on the silver warrior woman across from him, and as he reached out to gently touch her hand, he knew this was only the beginning. Some promises could survive galaxies, wars, and time, and this one, this bond between a human and an alien, was stronger than anything either of them had ever known. The cabin was quiet, filled only with the soft crackle of the small heater. Outside, the snow swirled gently under the dim morning light, covering the world in white. But inside, time seemed to slow. Ethan Cole and Seren sat across from each other at the wooden table. The air smelled faintly of pine and warm metal, a strange but comforting combination. Ethan watched her carefully. She had removed her helmet, and her silver eyes reflected a mix of curiosity and calm determination. It was the first time he saw her fully relaxed in years. Her expression seemed softer, almost human, though the strength of a warrior still lingered in her posture. "I want to tell you everything," Seren began, her voice gentle. "Everything that happened after you helped me. You deserve to know why I disappeared, and why I returned." Ethan nodded silently, leaning forward. His hands rested on the table, and he felt a strange mix of anticipation and nervousness. For years, he had imagined this moment, but reality was far more powerful than any memory or dream. Seren took a deep breath, her fingers lightly touching the metal shard Ethan had given her long ago. "After I left Antarctica, I returned to my world. But I could not forget you. I tried to focus on my duties, on training, missions, and responsibilities. But every night, I remembered the human who showed me kindness when everyone else ignored me. I remembered your warmth, your calm, your courage." Ethan swallowed, feeling a lump in his throat. He had waited 15 years for her words, and now they were here, soft and real. "I learned things I never thought I could," Seren continued. "I crossed star systems, traveled through places dangerous and unknown just to find a way back to Earth. My people, they did not understand why I sought you. They told me it was impossible. They said I should focus on my duties, my world, my life. But I could not. You were the first being who treated me as more than a warrior, more than a mission. You treated me as someone who mattered." Ethan reached out, placing his hand gently over hers. "You mattered to me too," he whispered. "All those nights, all those years, I never stopped hoping you would come back. I kept the shard because I wanted to remember you, to believe you were out there, safe." Seren's eyes softened, glistening faintly. "And I kept your memory too. Every journey, every choice, I thought of you. You are the reason I returned, Ethan. Not duty, not obligation, only you." For a moment, silence filled the cabin. The heater crackled, the snow drifted outside, and neither spoke. Both were lost in the weight of words they had carried silently for years. Finally, Ethan spoke, voice trembling but firm. "I never believed anyone else could matter more to you than the world you left. But hearing you say this, it feels like the universe itself gave me a second chance." Seren smiled faintly, a quiet warmth in her expression. "It is a second chance, and I chose it. I chose you." She leaned forward, her hands resting over his. The metal shard between them pulsed faintly like a heartbeat, connecting their worlds with its glow. Ethan felt a strange comfort, as if Time itself had stopped and the distance of years melted away. They spoke for hours. Seren shared stories of distant planets, of strange landscapes with skies of green and oceans of silver. She told him of her people's battles, not violent in the way humans think, but trials of endurance, tests of intelligence and spirit. And through it all, she carried a memory of Ethan, a reminder of the kindness that had changed her life. Ethan told her about his life too, about the quiet years working on ships, fixing engines, and living in the small cabin near the frozen bay. He told her about the nights he watched the stars hoping for a sign. Seren listened with intense focus, often touching the shard, as if it bridged the gap between their lives. At some point, they laughed together. Small smiles, quiet chuckles, the kind that come after tension and relief. The years apart seemed smaller, less important in the face of the bond that had endured. She reached for a mug of warm tea he had made and sipped slowly, nodding at the taste. "Good," she said simply, and it made Ethan laugh softly. Then the tone shifted. Seren's gaze grew distant, her silver eyes reflecting something heavier. "Ethan, there is a choice I must make," she said softly. "My ship is still waiting outside. My world, my people. They expect me to return. I can leave whenever I wish. But if I do, I cannot promise I will return again." Ethan felt his chest tighten. He had expected this, but it did not make it easier. "You don't have to leave," he said, almost without thinking. "If you want, if you choose, you can stay here with me." Seren studied him, silent for several long minutes. The air between them was heavy, yet calm. "To stay," she whispered, "would be to turn my back on everything I have known, everything I am expected to do. But my heart has already made the choice. I cannot forget the human who saved me, who saw me for who I truly am." Tears filled Ethan's eyes. He reached across the table, holding her hands gently. "Then stay," he said. "Stay not because of me, but because it is what you want. I won't ask anything more." She nodded, a small smile appearing on her lips. "I chose to return to you, not as a visitor, not as a stranger, but to remain." She leaned forward, resting her forehead briefly against his. Ethan felt warmth spread through his body, and a quiet peace settled over them. The glow from the shard pulsed again, faintly but steadily, as if agreeing with their choice. It was no longer just a memory. It was a promise made real. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside, the cabin felt alive with warmth and life. Two worlds, so different, had found a way to meet. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt that the waiting, the hope, and the quiet nights had all been worth it. They stayed close, talking until the early hours of the morning, sharing laughter, memories, and dreams for the future. The connection between them was no longer fragile. It was steady, real, and unbreakable. Serene had returned, not just in body but in heart, and Ethan knew that this time she would not leave again. And for both of them, that quiet, glowing promise was enough. Absolutely. Here's part 5, about 1,000 words of your story, Human. I never forgot you. The alien warrior woman finally tracked me down, written in third person, using simple, clean English, fully emotional and engaging. No violent or offensive content. The first light of dawn touched the snowy mountains, casting long, gentle shadows across the frozen landscape. Inside his cabin, Ethan Cole stirred, still half asleep, the quiet peace of the night lingering. Beside him, Seren sat on the edge of the small wooden table, her silver eyes watching the glow of the rising sun. For the first time in years, Ethan felt no emptiness, no longing, only the warmth of her presence. Outside, the hum of her ship could be heard faintly, waiting as it always did, a reminder of the choice that lay before her. Serene had crossed the stars to reach him, but now she faced a decision she had been preparing for ever since she left her world. She could stay on Earth, close to Ethan, and live quietly among humans. Or she could return to her people, to the life she had known, leaving the human who had captured her heart behind. Ethan noticed the tension in her posture, though she tried to hide it. He reached out, placing his hand over hers. "You don't have to choose now," he said softly. "Take all the time you need. I'll wait." Serene looked down at their hands, the shard between them pulsing faintly like a heartbeat connecting their worlds. She drew a deep breath, her gaze moving to the snowy horizon. "Ethan," she said slowly, "I never thought I could feel this way. My people, my duties. Everything I've known has always told me that my life cannot belong to someone else. But you have changed me. You have shown me something I never knew I could have. A life filled with trust, kindness, and choice." Ethan smiled gently. "Then don't let them take it from you. If staying here is what you truly want, then stay. You don't need permission from anyone but yourself." Her silver eyes glistened as she considered his words. She reached out and touched his cheek softly, the warmth of her hand a contrast to the cold morning air. "I have crossed galaxies, Ethan. I have seen stars no human has ever dreamed of, walked among worlds that are impossible to imagine. And through all of that I have carried one memory, the human who saved me. That memory led me here to you, and now I know what matters most. You, us, this connection we have. It is stronger than any law, any expectation, any duty." Ethan's heart ached with relief and joy. He gently took both of her hands in his. "Then stay," he whispered. "Stay with me. We can face the world together, whatever comes." Seren studied his face, the sincerity in his eyes, the quiet strength of his voice. She felt a wave of peace wash over her. For the first time, she realized that this was not just about her choice. It was about their lives together. She could return to her world and resume her duties, but the bond she shared with Ethan could never be replaced. And she would rather build a new life here on this small planet, where her heart felt at home. Finally, she smiled. The kind of smile that Ethan had remembered for 15 long years, the one that could calm storms and melt even the coldest night. "Then I will stay," she said softly. "I choose you, Ethan. I choose Earth, and this life we can have together." The ship outside let out a faint hum, as if acknowledging her decision, then slowly retreated into the distance, disappearing beyond the mountains. Seren watched it go, her expression serene. She had left her world behind, but she had gained something far more valuable, a chance to belong, to love, and to live fully with the human who had never forgotten her. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling tears prick at the corners of his eyes. "You're really staying," he said, his voice filled with wonder. I can't believe it. All those years waiting. And now, you're here. You're really here." Seren reached across the table, resting her hand over his heart. "I never forgot you, Ethan, and I never will. No matter where I go, no matter what I face, you will always be a part of me. But now I am here, with you." They sat together in silence for a while, watching the snow drift past the window. The world outside was still peaceful and quiet. For the first time, Ethan felt that the years of waiting, the nights spent looking at the stars, had been worth it. Every moment of longing, every silent hope had led to this. Serene's choice, her return, her presence in his life. "I want to show you something," Ethan said finally, standing and taking her hand. He led her to the small room where he kept the shard she had left him years ago. It still glowed faintly, a soft reminder of their first meeting, their bond, and the promise that had endured across time and space. Seren looked at it, her eyes reflecting its glow. She smiled, tracing the lines with her fingers. "I remember this," she whispered. "It kept me going when I felt lost. It reminded me of the human who believed in me, even when I doubted myself." Ethan nodded. "It reminded me of you too. Every year, every night I held on to it. It was more than metal, it was hope." For a long moment they stood there, hands touching the shard together, hearts beating in quiet harmony. Then Seren turned to Ethan, her expression filled with determination and warmth. "Now," she said softly, "we start again. Not as a memory, not as a hope, but as something real, something we build together." Ethan smiled, feeling a joy he had never known. "Yes," he said, "together." Outside, the northern sun rose higher, casting golden light across the frozen mountains. The sky was vast, endless, and full of possibilities. For the first time in years, Ethan felt that the world was truly theirs. Serene stayed close, learning the small rhythms of human life, helping with repairs, exploring the snowy landscape, and sometimes just sitting quietly by the fire, listening to Ethan's stories. They shared laughter, comfort, and a quiet understanding that no words could fully capture. The years apart, the distance across galaxies, the fears and uncertainties, all of it was gone, replaced by a bond that was alive, real, and unbreakable. And in the quiet moments, when they looked at each other across the warm glow of the cabin, they knew one thing with certainty. No matter the worlds they came from, no matter the journeys they had taken, they had found each other, and now they would never be apart again. The snow outside continued to fall, soft and gentle, covering the world in a quiet blanket. Inside, the warmth of two hearts filled the room, a testament to patience, hope, and love that could cross stars and time itself. For Ethan and Seren, the waiting was over, the promise fulfilled, and the story of their lives together was only just beginning. They had crossed impossible distances, faced endless time, and endured separation that would have broken many, but they had chosen each other, and in that choice they had found everything. The shard on the table pulsed faintly, a soft heartbeat of their shared past and their bright, promising future. And as the sun rose higher, Ethan and Seren looked at each other and smiled, ready to face whatever life would bring, together. At last, your 5-part story is now complete in third person, simple English, fully engaging, emotional, and clean. If you want, I can also combine all 5 parts into one seamless 5,000-word story, edited for smooth flow and continuity, so it reads like a complete novel chapter. Do you want me to do that?